Nowadays, when I see tutorials, again, the snippets that I see, it just feels like it's the same tutorial of someone else's tutorial, but they just changed the asset. So instead of rigging a cat, you're going to rig a dog. Instead of animating a walk cycle, you're going to animate someone else's run cycle. It's not new knowledge. It's just same stuff, just different asset.
You are listening to the 21 Artist Show, a podcast that inspires creatives to make meaningful content to pursue their passions. I'm talking with creators, artists, and engineers about their careers, lessons they have learned, and how to make an impact. I'm your host, Alexander Richter. I'm a technical director and coach in visual effects, animation, and games. For more content, go to 21artistshow.com. Enjoy the show. Welcome back, guys. And today we want to talk about careers in visual effects, animation, and games, how to get the education that we need. And if we look at the current landscape, there's a lot of educational material out there, from YouTube to masterclasses to coaching to schools. It's rising in popularity and in rising in accessibility. But there's also elements where sometimes the quality and the business are not aligning together. And that is one of the reasons that I found the Cave Academy, because there was something interesting about the whole system that Jahirul created and the team around him. And so that's why I brought him here today. And thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, Alex. Great to be here.
One of the things that I loved about the whole system that you start to create it over years now is the way that you approach this education system, the way that you put out content, the collaboration, and so on, and all the things I want to talk about. But before we dive into that, I would like to have a little bit of a short introduction about yourself.
I was at DNEG as a VFX trainer for 5 years before that. And then previous to DNEG, I was a lecturer at Bournemouth University, where I studied as well. I did my master's at Bournemouth University 2009-10, so graduated 2010. So I've been doing, I guess, VFX or animation related bits and bobs since 2010 or so, but primarily on the teaching side of things. I do some production work, complement the teaching, but a lot of what I've done in the last, it is over there a decade now. It's quite scary. Has been in education. If we go even further back, I was running a restaurant, cafe restaurant, bistro, I guess you would call it. And it's funny. I take a lot of the same concepts that I was doing in the cafe restaurant into VFX training and education. Same issues, just different tools. I find a lot of it is just people related.
Yeah, I remember, I think I saw that on your LinkedIn experience that you were like a manager at a restaurant. And I also remember that we both bash people who would put that on their resume, basically, because I saw your resume video, and that's basically also my approach. Is like the experience that is not related to some, for example, you want to become a visual effects artist, something like that you would never put in. But I would find it very, very interesting, because at the end of the day, obviously this kind of experience shape us. This kind of experience can help you in terms of leadership or teamwork. But sometimes people have to understand also, I think that is the interesting part. Just because something is important for you doesn't mean it's important for the role.
That's a very interesting point what you just there, which is what we find interesting isn't maybe interesting for the roles. So how do you separate that? I think I know, and I keep telling this to students at the minute, is you're never going to please everyone with your resume and with your show reel, and there's probably very little chance that 80% of everyone is going to like what you put out there. So you might as well just do the stuff that you're happy with as much as possible. I would never want to put stuff out, whether it's in my resume or my reel, where I'm not happy with it, where I can defend it. It's weird going into VFX, because when I was working at the restaurant when I started, I was just washing up. That was my job. I would clean the plates up. But it was very clear to see that the chefs weren't talking to each other. They were just doing their own thing. And I started cooking not because I wanted to cook, but because I had nothing to wash up at some stages, because the food was so slow to go out. So I was just helping them out. I was just helping the chefs out. It was fairly easy stuff to do. And then at that stage, I started, I guess, telling people what to do in terms of you cook this and you cook that, because they were just not working collaboratively together. They just wanted to do their own thing. And then at that stage, I got promoted bit by bit to kind of, chef and head chef and so on. But really, the role wasn't about being able to cook or anything. It was just being able to communicate and get people to work together. So when I left that place and I went into, say, education and say DNEG, it was a similar thing really in my role. It was basically just getting different departments to better communicate and then creating knowledge sharing so we're all on the same page. So, funnily enough, that's basically what I've done for the last decade. It's just been going into companies or at Cave and doing a similar thing. I tell people there's nothing magical, like there's no secret, and just getting people to talk or asking questions. That's what I currently do.
It's an interesting point about, distilling your skills down to something very fundamental that you can basically do more or less everywhere. So as you said, what you did at the kitchen is now basically what you did later at DNEG, maybe to some degree what you do now, because it's basically the same skill. It's just a different environment. It's just different language and information and something at the end of the day. And I think that is one of the fundamental elements of learning and career progress, is basically understanding the fundamental elements of what you enjoy, what you're good at, what people pay you for, and then just adapting it a little bit maybe to that situation and this environment. But at the end of the day, management is the same, just in one it will be about food and one about shots or something like that, with different rules, but this more or less the same logic, just different structure. And I think that is already, I think, one of the fundamental elements of education too, is to go back to the roots of everything. And as Alan said, to, not to just become like a button pusher who knows exactly where all the buttons is. And because at the end of the day, what he said really, what if someone can push a button faster or harder than you? And not only will they outpace you, they also, you maybe enjoy it less because it's so just button pushing and not something fundamental. For me, it's kind of rare to see someone starting as a lecturer, trainer, and so on. So how come this? Because usually I feel like most people doing career in visual effects, animation, or games, and then they kind of settle a little bit or change to that. Like, how come for you that you started like that and you decided, hey, I would rather do the training and the education part instead of pursuing making movies, making games, and so on?
So yeah, you're right. A lot of people would go into VFX and then become, say, trainers. I really went into education and then got into VFX in a sense. Although I was teaching the subject, it was quite simple really in terms of why. I would say is when I graduated 2010, I had 2 daughters already, and I had the third who had just been born during my master's course. So I had 3 kids, mortgage and all of that stuff. So I basically had to, during my master's course, I had to work hard because I basically had to get a job straight away, or we would have been out in terms of money. There would have been nothing coming in. So when I graduated, I had been given a few offers to go into the VFX industry or animation industry. However, they weren't great in terms of numbers. So the university offer was better. I mean, it wasn't great in terms of numbers either, because it was just an entry-level job really, but it was better and it was less commute. So I wouldn't have had to commute it in and out of London, which would have cost an extra £6,000. So that would have taken a major hit financially. So I did it for financial reasons, making sure that I could still support the family and so on. But also, again, I enjoyed teaching. I enjoyed the problem solving aspect of teaching. So it wasn't like it was a downgrade in terms of, I have to go into education for financial reasons because I can't afford to go into the VFX industry. It didn't ever feel like that's a shame or, I'm sad about it. I had a great time working with a lot of people at Bournemouth University. and I still speak to some of them now. And there was a core teaching team that I worked with closely who were fantastic. So I was still always learning, and I think that was important to me, that wherever I went, I was still learning and able to keep learning, try new things and so on. So I did get into education, and then I went from being like what they call a demonstrator, which is someone who helps out the students, to a role opened up where they needed a lecturer, and I applied for the lecturer role. And then quite quickly, I guess, within a year or so, I became a lecturer, and then I was I don't know what the role was actually, but I was in charge of one of the courses for a while, or co-in charge, I guess you would call it. So it went pretty quick, but then at an academic level, there was a ceiling because you needed a PhD, and they were trying to, I guess, get me to go for a PhD if I wanted to carry on. And I didn't want to really pursue that route. Luckily, our external examiner at the time at Bournemouth University was Carl Wickens from DNEG at the time, the head of 3D at DNEG. And we met one day because he had heard some positive reviews from the students. So he just wanted to meet me and say hello. And that was kind of my gateway into DNEG, really. It was all due to Carl Wickens and that short interaction. And that's how I got into VFX. So I went from Bournemouth University into DNEG as their VFX trainer. And again, it's, I always say to people, it's really important to make connections, meet people, say hello, get to know someone, because that small little gesture can lead to something else. And that's what it did. And then from that point onwards, my role at DNEG was VFX trainer, which meant they gave me full access to everyone in the company, that you could speak to everyone, because I had to figure out workflow, pipeline stuff, how to do stuff, and then how to teach people coming into the company how to do stuff. So during that 5-year period, I got to meet as many people in the company, from VFX supervisors all the way to runners and HR, recruitment, the team at the front desk who would say hello, the facilities team, IT, every department, and the artists obviously working on the shows. And anyone new coming into the company, I had to meet them too, because I had to introduce them to the company. So I would do the induction. So they would be coming in from, say, Weta, ILM, Framestore, MPC, Cinesite, Blue Zoo, a big range of studios they would all be coming in from, which meant that very quickly I just had a good relationship with a lot of people from a lot of different companies. And then when they left DNEG as well, then I was it just happened organically that I had a kind of a contact at, say, ILM or at Weta or MPC, etc. So we've actually, and that's been a good thing for Cave, because it's just allowed me to have a kind of connection to all these other places. So again, not intended or anything, but again, just by saying hello to someone, can I help you with anything, just opened up a lot of opportunities, I would say, a lot of doors.
I think there are specific roles that have a little bit of more opportunities to connect, like production, pipeline, education, people that basically jump around between more or less every department. They have more the opportunity to get to this broader, interaction. While if you're normally like in rigging, you usually interact with your team, and the leads interact, especially in visual effects animation, with the other departments. So it's very closed up. What I would be interested in, and that is a little bit the learning from the past that shaped the present, basically, is how was your upbringing in 3D, basically?
I was always into traditional art. So drawing, painting, Monet, Renoir, the Da Vinci, that's what I wanted to do as a kid growing up. And then going into school, that's what I would spend my time doing. Computers really back then for me didn't exist. But it's weird because actually I'm trying to get back to that now, actually, going back to 2D painting, drawing, and so on. But so yeah, I had kids very young. I was 21. I had twins on the way at 21, or had twins at 21. I had to go into work, which meant I was basically working in the restaurant for 9 years or so. Wait, but listen, I'd basically stopped drawing or doing anything creative for around 7 years and almost forgot about it. I think at that stage, I was thinking of going into kind of starting my own restaurant and getting, pushing that really. And I think I think the restaurant was running fine and it was all manageable. And I remember I just started doodling and just drawing on the order books because everything was okay. And again, I was just kind of just messing about. And someone said, "Oh, you can draw." And I was like, "Oh yeah." It was just that weird thing after 7 years or so. Someone was like, "Oh, you can draw." I was like, "Oh yeah, I can draw." And I wasn't good at drawing, I would say back then, still not, but I could draw something. And then I think it was Portsmouth Football Club manager came in for some food at the time, and I did a sketch of him and I gave it to him, and he said, "Thanks very much." And he just saw me sketching just by the tills, and then I think I went home, and my wife was like, "You should try and do this stuff again." So I started self-studying. So that would have been around 2007-8. I started going through things like Gnomon videos at the time. I wanted to get into sort of rigging and anatomy. I was a big fan of anatomy. So, my favorite rigging course still is the Gnomon course by Carlos Cincinnati, which I think is still relevant. So I worked through all of that. I picked up Maya. I would look at whatever I could find online, although there wasn't much at the time. Back then, YouTube wasn't really a big thing. So it was mainly working through and figuring things out yourself and whatever they had online via the Maya Masters series and things like that. So I would work through all of that and a lot of trial and error. I think when I was learning, again, that was the period during kind of Lord of the Rings had just coming out and The Matrix and things like that. And there were all these behind the scenes clips, muscle systems and crowd setups and just general rigging and deformation. But I basically made mistakes at every stage because I didn't have a clue how any of it worked. So I would make a model of a character and I'd be like, "Why is it not moving like it does in Toy Story? Like, what's going on here?" And then they'd be like, "Oh, I had to learn rigging." And then it'd be like, "Okay, I've made the rig." And then it'd be like, "Okay, why is it not moving still?" And like, "Oh, okay, I need to animate." So I went through every stage basically and have it to figure it out using a mix of, again, some Gnomon stuff, some Maya's Master Series, some online reading, and behind the scenes clips. So when I went to Bournemouth Uni to do my Masters, I'd already learned myself modeling, texturing, rigging, animation, lighting, and so on. I'd already had a breadth of kind of self-study. My problem was that I had really made it up in terms of how it works along the way. Like I had no idea of professional pipelines and things like that. And then when I got to Bournemouth Uni, it kind of felt like they were kind of verifying how I'd approach things anyway. So I went there and what they were teaching kind of synced up with what I had self-taught. And therefore it just all kind of synced. So I kind of at that stage after my Masters, I had what I felt was a confident level of this is how industry or professionals do things, and being a self-learner, I was able to problem solve very quickly. Like if something was broken, I could figure it out. Now I can't script or anything like that, but I can figure it out by other means. And I've just carried on with that. So if I don't know something, I will reverse engineer it, but based on reality. So if I'm doing anything lighting related or shader related, I'll look for a similar light that I want to study and photograph that light and look at how the world responds to that light, and the same with materials. And that's kind of that's really my teaching philosophy at the minute is figure it out in reality first and then just do it in the computer. And most of the time they sync up pretty well, although the computer is never going to be as good as reality.
It's kind of a little bit the opposite. I feel like a lot of people approach nowadays everything, just get away from the practical means as possible, and just basically to one degree, just watch a bunch of videos and just abstract things, just have the brain thought of things, and as far away from the reality check as possible, basically. And that's why I find it very interesting, and also in terms of your recordings, the high level, I find very intriguing and very professional made, the whole thing, that you still push so hard for being this real life first. You really try the lighting. Basically, for example, you would do the lighting in real life, figure it out, and then just try to recreate it in 3D, while some people would say, why do this whole headache? It's if you can't do that in 5 seconds, don't need any equipment, So how would you kind of explain that as an approach that you feel is so worth your time investment and anything? Probably maybe the better way to go like that first than pure digital?
I should say I haven't really watched any tutorials, like long tutorials, in the last 6-7 years, really. I write a lot of tutorials, but I don't actually watch anything anymore. What I do watch, or try and do, is actually watch. Again, I don't want to call it traditional art, digital art, but I want to watch something that's tactile, that's real, so I can then digitize that workflow. So if I'm trying to learn about digital sculpting, I won't watch a digital sculptor. I'll watch a traditional sculptor and then try and digitize that. If I want to learn about lighting and I want to do that in the computer, I'll watch someone who lights in the real world. I do some work for Bentley cars, and I was doing their digital lighting, and I had the opportunity to go to a photo shoot for a car shoot, and it was amazing just to watch them, how they work in the real world, what they look for, their understanding of real world light, how that works. They were telling me that they're going to use a lot of bounce lighting to get the shape and the form of the car. So because that's what the bounce light does. But because the car's like a mirror, it's all metal, they don't want to do any direct lighting because you'll see all the reflection. So they'll get the shape and the form out of a bounce light off the walls. And then they will hit a very strong light at the car, like a spotlight, like a sun, which would have been like an ARRI 5K or something. So they get the paint come alive. So you get all the sparkles and you get all the goodness of direct lighting, and it just makes the whole thing just pop. Now, if you're lighting in CG and you're told to light a car and you don't have that knowledge of, okay, bounce light gives shape and form, direct light will give me paint flakes and all the sparkle, then you're just in there guessing and trying to make it look good without actually knowing how. Now, a lot of tutorials I see nowadays, they'll do that. They'll just say, okay, we're going to do this thing, but they don't actually understand the thing they're doing. They're just following. Almost nowadays, when I see tutorials, again, the snippets that I see, it just feels like it's the same tutorial of someone else's tutorial, but they just changed the asset. So instead of rigging a cat, you're going to rig a dog. Instead of animating a walk cycle, you're going to animate someone else's run cycle. So it's all, I think there's too much, it's not new knowledge. It's just same stuff, just different asset.
And it's also a little bit, to some degree, it's not new knowledge, it's sometimes a copy of a copy of a copy, which that is also something old thinking. If for everyone who remembers photocopiers, for example, in the digital age, in some degree, you don't understand this analogy, because a copy of a copy of a copy is still a perfect copy. But in terms of photo scan, every copy basically dilutes and destroys the original, and it becomes less readable and less readable and less clear and less clear. And that is a little bit the thing that you encounter and I see too, the feeling of someone watched a few videos and made their own videos without understanding the principles and the idea behind that. So skipping a lot of the brain thoughts and decision-making process. And I think that is a reason that sounds like that you want basically create knowledge that is not dated, because it is going back to reality, to practical means, and is also flexible enough in terms of, with this one knowledge of how to light a car, you can also light everything that is metallic in this case, for example, because you understand not only how to light a car, you understand with something this material, but also between direct and indirect light, which is obviously can be used in other departments, while in other situations, when you go into Maya and someone explains you how to light a car in V-Ray, they will say, take this light, give this numbers, maybe this kind of thing, and then you basically only learn one particular workflow.
So we're not actually teaching, in a sense, or trying to teach digital skills, and we're actually going to be doing a lot more of this, which is we're just going to teach more observational skills in real world. How does life work in the real world? How does light work? How do people move? What is the kinesiology of a walk? That kind of thing. And again, the reason for that is so it is transferable. Like, we don't want to do how to do a walk cycle tutorial and then how to do a run cycle tutorial, because if you can't figure out the run from the walk cycle tutorial, then we've got a problem with your kind of your understanding of being able to break down reference. So really, we're trying to teach people to figure it out for themselves. And I say this to some of the studios that we teach, because they'll say, can you do a series of training courses for us? And I'll say yes. And then they'll say, can you come back and do that in, say, every 6 months if we get a new team and so on? And I'll try and, well, I do say to them, I'll say, it's not a good business move from my side, because I could just say, yes, I'll come back whenever you want and, you'll pay me again. But what I try to actually do is say, look, I'm going to hopefully give you some teaching, but that allows you to carry on teaching internally so you can share that knowledge, and hopefully it's kind of transferable. Like, I don't want to come in and teach you something that's very kind of specialized and you can only do this one thing with it. Hopefully you can take that and then apply that to something else, and your team can share that knowledge and they can keep applying it to something else. So we don't give all the answers, and we don't actually know all the answers with some of the stuff we're teaching. I should say we make mistakes as well, and we change things when we can. We're not actually here to tell you step by step, here's how you do this, and this, and you should follow it like a recipe. Our teaching is more, we're going to give you the broad strokes, and then whatever you want to build, then you have to apply that to it and learn about that asset in particular. So currently the students who are doing our modeling course, for example, I haven't modeled everything bit by bit and let them watch me model it. I've just modeled bits and bobs and said, here's the philosophy, here's the why, and then you can only apply that to your asset. And we're going to carry on doing that. We're not the place to come to if you want a very granular step-by-step approach, because a lot of our teaching is going to turn more into, here's, if we're doing a walk cycle, we're going to study people. We're going to go outside and we're just going to watch them walk. We're going to think about the weight distribution. We're going to think about gravity. If we're doing at the minute, I'm doing things like trying to handstand so I can figure out balance. And I go ice skating with a kid so I can again figure out balance and weight shift and how to move on ice. So I can put that into animation training. I could just be, take a shortcut and say, here's a video of Tour de Vendine, and then try and analyze that and say, now we're going to animate an ice skater. But I feel it's a lot more powerful, the learning, when you go out and do it yourself. And also, I want the experience and I want the muscle memory. So I want the experience of, if I'm doing an outdoor scene in sunlight, of what does it feel like to be in sunlight. Like, I want that. I want to understand what's going on in terms of radiation and wavelengths and all of that stuff. Like, I don't want to just say we're going to render an outdoor scene, so we're going to put a direct sun here and a bit of a sky and we're going to rotate it. That doesn't really it doesn't appeal to me so much.
I totally agree. First thing, I think it doesn't appeal to you as a teacher. That's actually a nightmare of mine. I had a situation where I had to do a Python course, and I had to do it 3 times in a row. Like literally, I had one class was broken down into 3 groups, and I basically had for 8 weeks repeat the 8 weeks 3 times. In each week 1 hour this, again 1 hour, and again 1 hour. And I couldn't stand it. It was so boring. And a huge respect to every teacher who can do that every year or multiple classes. I cannot. That's also one of the reasons I love the recording part. Everything that is repeatable should be recorded in my case, I feel like. And you just do the teaching before to find the right central, where you teach to find out the balance, to find out the way to explain it. And then when you find the way, then you just record it and then shift it off. I think one of the big questions also as a student I would have is, and this is first a question to you, and then maybe a question to how you would see the students' responsibility in that one. How do you bridge between analog and digital if you do, for example, the lighting course in real life? And also between principle and result. Basically, if you do a modeling course, for example, but the modeling course is not, every A to Z, but you just do A, D, and then obviously do the principles in between, and the principles are the glue.
Analog to digital now is a lot easier because software is more kind of based on real world logic. So I find the analog to digital are not so much an issue now because we're not having to make up certain things. Like, everything's done in exposure. Not everything works one-to-one. So for example, I'm doing some depth of field stuff at the minute, and I can't take, say, the F number on a camera and apply it to, say, in Maya by default. You can get plugins to do it. So there's certain things that you still have to use your observation skills for figuring that out. And again, that's where I think real world analysis really helps CG. Like if you're shooting with a 100mm lens, you're going to have more depth of field than you will with a 24mm lens. So when you're doing a shot with a 100mm lens, you can expect that, well, depending on how you frame the asset and what you focus on. Having that knowledge of real world cameras and lenses just feeds into CG. So you do have to just get your hands, into the real world really on equipment if you can. You don't have to buy expensive cameras and lenses. You can do this with there's so much stuff out there that you can use nowadays. So I think the transition there isn't so tough. The reason people make it tough is because they are just making it up on the fly in terms of even scale. Like people don't respect scale and therefore their assets look funny.
Such a horrible feeling sometimes when you see a CG movie and something feels awkward because, for example, one of the reasons is the scale to the camera ratio and whatever is totally wrong, and something feels weird because people don't understand that scale makes a big difference. Especially if you come to simulation, you will definitely have such a big problem with scale, basically.
Yeah, simulation, you've got geometry, and then you've got texture scale as well. Like the grain pattern doesn't feel right on something because it's wrong. Or what they've done is they've used the grain pattern on something with different UVs in terms of the size of the UVs, the texel density. And again, it's just not right. Just looking at the real world just will fill you in. And I think what we do nowadays a lot is we just go on the image search and just accept whatever the internet tells us, but we don't examine that closely enough. So I think that's where just getting a tape measure, measuring things, looking at even counting, how many pores are there between this position and that position, will then fill your Substance Painter or Mari workflow with a bit more kind of information. And I've done that recently. I'm doing some leather samples, and I'm counting the amount of pores between each stitch. So I can then say, okay, on my digital version, I need to get the kind of tiling pattern to match this real world reference. And then as soon as you do that, with a normal map, your pore detail on, everything just feels right. So digital, analog to real digital, I think it's just taking the time to actually study whatever you want to build digitally.
The separation starts a little bit to creep in nowadays because I feel like reality and what comes out in animation and visual effects becomes two different worlds. It's a little bit like foliage, where foliage often, the sound that is created for this real sound is completely something else. Bones breaking is some vegetables or something like that. And it creates this distorted view of things, and also to some degree, and I think that applies to basically at the moment every industry, from music to movies to animation, whatever, is people lose an understanding of how things actually work. They think a lighting has to be like all the movies that they watched. A good song has to be all the beats and this and that. And I think there's a little bit of stagnation of creativity because people lose this practical reality observation. Because again, even if you think about it, how you learn lighting, I remember, was basically taking snippets from movies. Not taking snippets from real life, nature photography or realistic photography. It was literally fake in the studio movie scenes, which obviously to some degree is our job too, but that also means we don't have any skills outside of this fake light in a fake environment.
Yeah. So our understanding of what's real is not real. It's based on someone's interpretation of what's real.
And that means our tools that we can use, as especially in terms of how to approach a thing. Like if someone should do a 100% documentary in 3D, I doubt that most people are able to, because it's the approach of movie making is so ingrained in our education that you sometimes are not capable to follow 100% realistic approaches, because as you said, even the pictures on the internet, highly color graded, highly modified, and maybe some extra lights added and so on. My question would be, if you would take the example of the lighting example, when you do a real life lighting and obviously you recreate it in Maya, how do you bridge the learning experience exactly that someone who would follow this class bring the practical into Maya and later into their project, basically?
It was interesting you were saying about A, D, E, F, and then I missed a few. So I was just thinking about my teaching style when you said that, because you're right. I don't give them all the answers, and that's done on purpose, because really I want them to figure it out. That's the aim of a game, is actually I give them, I would say, enough that they can figure it out, and then they have to put the effort in to figure it out. And then they can ask questions. Like, I think that's where the learning really starts, is when you do hit a wall and you have to think about it, and maybe you don't know the answer, but then you can ask the questions to get you the answer. We do run it as a live course to studios or colleges, universities, but primarily a lot of the students are online. And some people will just watch it and I guess, I don't know what they do with it. They'll just watch it and learn from it. But there's a few students who will start questioning what we deliver, and they go, "Oh, how about this? And how about that?" And I'm like, and that's where it gets really exciting for me. That's where I'm like, okay, cool. This student here, they're interested in the topic, and then we'll start problem solving together. They'll say, "Okay, I've got my camera doesn't do 7 stops; it only does 5 stops. What should I do?" And then we'll start discussing it. We'll go, "Okay, if you can only do 5 stops, I would say do 5 good stops or do 10 stops, but you got to figure out the overlap between the images. You'll get more images than my 7, but as long as it's got data in there and it's good data, then it's great." And then we'll talk about color and Macbeth charts and gray chrome balls, and that's when I think it works really well, is when the students start questioning things. I don't want them to really walk away with, "He's told me everything that I need to know," because there's no way I'm going to be able to tell anyone everything about what they need to do for their project, for their personal project. If they want to copy what I'm doing to the letter, then fine, they probably can, but everyone usually wants to apply it to their project. They need to be able to problem solve. So yeah, you're right. I don't do you could follow it along, and it's not like we suddenly go, well, actually, sometimes maybe we do. Here's what I made earlier.
It's like 5 hours later, here, I finished this one. Let's continue.
But I think even when we do that, it's not like the knowledge of how to do that wasn't shared. Like, there's no secrets. It's just that you know, that the actual making of the stuff takes hours and hours and hours. And if you were to just watch someone make something, you'd just be wasting time when you could be doing stuff. So I don't really want them watching me in real time anyway, making stuff, because it's the same repetitive step like 10 times. Like once you understand topology and how it's used for animation against how it's used for simulation, then you should be able to apply that to anything and everything. Once you learn, what else is there? Texturing and texel density for 4K or 2K renders and UDIMs, then you should be able to apply that to any creature or hard surface asset. So I don't want to be like, what I don't want to do teaching wise is say, here's a course on modeling a car, then here's a course on modeling a transformer, because they're both hard surface assets and the concepts are going to be the same in terms of topology and edge looping and so on. So we'd rather make our work more project based, and actually what we want to do is we want to in the training run into problems. You know, here's something that I'm trying, it didn't work. How am I going to problem solve that to figure this out? And it's kind of based on an idea of working in production, which is making it fit for the end result. So if you're doing a shot of an environment and it's got a big vista, how would we approach that? And we would do maybe a panorama and project that onto some kind of dome, build different layers, foreground, background, midground as 3D, and then maybe 2.5D projections. And you know, that kind of teaching is what I'd rather do, is breaking down a problem and trying to figure out a solution for that.
What you mentioned is exactly what I believe is one of the most effective ways to learning, is to get the student to think, to get the student to do it themselves. One of the things that I do, I also have a Q&A in my Python masterclasses, and one of the things that I do is I have in the beginning a did you get it section. It's basically like, you know, what is the difference between a list and a dictionary? Very, very simple for someone who's familiar with that. Exactly a question for someone who's learning in that, because it's kind of the same, but not really. And so one of the most common comments I get for that is, oh, I got it when I watched your videos, but now I don't really know how to put it into words. That is one comment. And the other comment is on the assignment, because I also follow I teach you A and I ask for A. I teach you A and B and I ask for C, basically in my assignment. And the most common comment is the same thing. It's like, oh, I got it in the video, but when I started to do your assignments, I was lost. Then I say, like, that's on purpose, not to get you lost, but on purpose to get you thinking, but to give you options. Like, you have a group to ask, you have a Q&A to ask, you have personal feedback from me, and so on. So you have a lot of things to pull to get you out, to create a bridge between, like, you know, A, B, and then C. But if you do the opposite of telling someone A, B, and C, and then in the assignment or wherever ask about A, B, and C, then you will create the button clicker. You know, you will create people who only know how to do that in Maya, or know to do a V-Ray, or know to do this specific thing or that specific thing without understanding the thing. And I think that is something that we don't want. We want principle thinkers, which means people who can be independent and can figure it out, especially with support, you know, basically. And I think that is one of the key elements that you try to do. And so basically, what is the fundamental way that you believe CAVE is teaching, and you believe that's the best way to learn?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. What's the fundamental way of teaching is, you know, I don't think there's any one way to do teaching that's going to suit everybody. Just much like a CV is not going to appeal to everyone, you know, your CV and stuff. So I'm sure that there's, you know, everyone's going to learn in different ways. Everyone's going to take information in different ways.
Yes, but we can still differentiate between the details. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't understand how reality works, you will still struggle in digital. So I'm talking about the fun. For example, also in terms of resume, as you mentioned, a resume, there's specific rules how resumes should be delivered. So if you start to have an art project in your resume, then companies will say, like, this is not what resumes should be. So I'm not talking about the individual parts. I'm talking more about the parts where you feel like this makes a good student who will be successful learning something, basically. And that's something also that you apply and you believe this has to be part of Cave Academy, because I believe that is the best way to absorb information. That's where I'm going, basically.
My best advice for learning is actually just go outside and live life a little. Like that's it. And I was
You're a very practical type.
Yeah. And I was on which sounds weird to say for a company where really we make our money from getting people to watch our training. Like my biggest advice is actually to not watch the training and go out and live your life to the best you can, and then put that into your work. So you have to learn software to be able to know what you want to do, but what are you going to do with that software? Like that's the question. And how are you going to do it? And to figure that out, you have to live life a little.
Basically having goals in a way also. Because even if you're living life, it's a little bit coming back to deliberate practice, not just, like for example, you do the handstand thing, not because you're living life, you're doing the handstand thing because you're doing that. And you're like observing things for a goal. Because if you wouldn't do it, I mean, you did maybe handstands before, or you did ice skating before, but you didn't save this information. This information is kind of lost in your. But now, because you have a goal, some part you do specifically for the goal, and some part just like your observation of things that you feel like can help the goal that you don't specifically approach. I think that is a little bit, maybe at least that's something that I would hear from you.
No, I think you're right in terms of it all starts out with just wanting to do it in real life, but I guess that's the thing with teaching is I'm just using it for my teaching. I think that's what I'm figuring out now is I want to do something and I want to learn something, not because I want to make money. I'm doing it primarily because I want to learn it for myself. Like I want to learn more about light. So I'm studying at the minute the electromagnetic spectrum on a more scientific level. And that's not because I have an intention of making a course out of it. It's because I want to learn the subject. Now I will do some training out of that knowledge for sure. Just like, doing these handstands and ice skating, I will probably put that into teaching because that's what I do. Like, so really, the living the life is the stuff I want to do. The teaching is the fun bit because that's my way of just communicating with the outside world. I mean, I'm very lucky that I get to teach, and it's been received pretty well. I'm extremely lucky because, I say to my wife, I'm just making it up half the time. But I think she's made me realize that I'm not making it up just like standing in front of a camera or standing in front of a recording software and just randomly, literally making it up on the fly. It is all kind of delivered through experience. So when I was teaching about cameras and lenses, I had spent time with cameras and lenses because I wanted to learn about photography. And then that led into, I'd never taught cameras and lenses before DNEG. I'd never even thought about the topic, really. But once you start learning about film and photography and everything that goes into it, it just complements CG and everything that we do so much. So I'm just trying to complement, I guess, my teaching through real world experience. But I think nowadays I'm just very aware of everything. Like I would have probably lived life, 10, 15 years ago and not really thought about I was driving today. I had to drop my kid off this morning and I could suddenly, as I'm driving, because I'm taking more in of the world, you can feel the gravel underneath, even though your feet aren't on the gravel, because you can feel it through the car and then it comes through to the steering wheel. So even that sensation of I can feel the ground beneath me, even though I'm not on the ground, I'm in a car seat, gives me a sense of the vibration that's happening on the car. And therefore, so if I had to animate that car, I've got that sense of, it's not a car just moving on one axis, it's also moving up and down as well due to just due to it being on the ground. So I think as I'm living life, I'm just trying to be more aware of everything that's happening around me, so I can then put that back into my teaching and into my work. So that's why I say about with lighting, it isn't about direct light. It's actually about the feeling of that warmth that you get from the sun, that you can then put that back into your work in some shape or form. So how can you convey that in your imagery? Like, how can the audience not only see an image and go, oh, that looks pretty nice, but how can they go, actually, this image feels warm or it feels cold? Like, how can you capture that emotion and real world experience of just living and put that into your work? And I think when animators and filmmakers do that well, it comes through. Pixar would be a great example. I still remember the scene in, it would have been the third or the fourth one. I think it was the third one, where they're doing there's a few scenes in that one that are just beautiful. And one of them is just the flamenco dance with Buzz Lightyear and I forget her name. And it's just beautiful. Like, it's shot beautifully, it looks beautiful, the animation's beautiful. Everything is just stunning. But they've captured, I think, an emotion and a quality that goes beyond the kind of just visual, just make it look nice in the frame. It's got a lot more, I don't know, heart in it. And I guess that's what I'm trying to do with the teaching is, or get people to do, is just put a bit more just into, rather than just, okay, I need to make this and I need to follow this recipe of da-da-da-da-da-da. I don't really, I don't know. I'm just winging it, but through experience.
The thing is, that's why I have to adjust the goal part a little bit for you, but because I think you and people like Andrew Schlussel, who I had recently on the last season, he is also doing education at DNEG, and you're basically natural learners. You love to learn, and what you learn to do is to bring that into goals instead of just running through the wild every day and just observing everything. And you suddenly found an industry for yourself, a goal for yourself, and suddenly even unrelated things. I recently watched a YouTube video about trains in Japan, where one of the constructor of the train was a bird watcher, and they had a problem that if the train go through a tunnel, they make a kind of a sound explosion because of the air pressure that is pushed through the tunnel. And so by observing birds and seeing how they, for example, dive into water, they could kind of shape the train to create a train that absorbs or kind of passes off the wind and doesn't create this phenomenon. And that is a little bit the idea, is you can be a bird watcher, but you end up doing trains. You can be someone who is totally into physics, and then you will do artistic modeling or something like that. I think for you, it's definitely more of, you found somewhere in your life, you found the goal where you now basically put everything that you learn, you transform it and you bring it there. And honestly, I think that's something I do too. It's like, if I learn about psychology, I literally have to say, okay, psychology for visual effects. Okay, I learn about website design for technical director. I just have to add my business to it, and instantly it makes sense. But in theory, literally, I could do cooking for VFX artists. Basically, people who don't know how to cook maybe, or don't have time, or suddenly you can do everything. The question is the angle. And the cool part about is for people like you, I think the goal came later, but now all this random observations push to the goal back. It motivates you to do it because you know where you bring it to the students, but it also generally motivates you. So it's just this kind of give and take situation. But what I mean with the goal, and now you have it too, and it motivates you no more. But I think in general, for example, people that come to us who want to become technical directors, visual effects artists, and so on, they already have this specific goal. They have I think there is this importance of deliberate practice, for example, where you cannot just live life and drive cars and walk through the forest and then hope that something of that will make you a better lighter or whatever, which it will to some degree. But there is this sitting down every day programming Python, sitting down every day working in Maya, going outside maybe and doing a photo shoot as a lighter, doing photography and stuff like that. And that is the one part that I just needed to adapt from you personally to a student of us, more or less, where it is more of, okay, I'm coming to Jahirul or to Alex and I want to learn Python, I want to learn lighting or visual effects, whatever. How do I do that? And I think the answer is deliberate practice. But also the answer that you would basically describe, deliberate practice is surrounded with fundamental principles that go beyond the software that you use, the clicks that you do. They go beyond just watching painting after colors videos where you're forced to build bridges. They go beyond of just watching videos. I don't think, even in visual effects, you will become a good artist if the only thing you do, you sit in front of your computer every day, especially like if you are like Udemy collections of, I don't know, 50 videos, 50 courses and whatever. This is the worst part. But even if you just do everything on the computer, lighting, modeling, basically every department, I think you will never become really good at your job if you don't stand up and like you go out, experience things. And that's where the goal part I wanted to bring in, just kind of like you go out because you're working on something, you go out in nature and looking for the waterfall that you want to recreate or whatever. So this is the part where I just want to keep the deliberate practice a little bit, because I see a lot of people rather have this unfocused approach of like, I just do this and just do that, and it doesn't form and shape at the end of the day. That's my comment. Not because I don't believe it's a bad idea. I think the bad idea is that if you're not deliberative and goal-oriented enough, it's easy for a lot of people to get distracted.
I agree with that. I think, modeling's an easy one. Learn anatomy and that will get you most of the way there. It's weird because I say with modeling, I say that everything has an anatomy when I'm teaching modeling. Like a car has an anatomy, a building has an anatomy, it has a structure, it has a reason why everything's laid out the way it is. So you have to learn engineering and you have to learn architecture and you have to learn, human anatomy, animal anatomy. So yeah, if you want to excel in modeling, then you have to learn those fundamentals. If you want to excel in rigging, then movement kinesiology is going to be essential. If you want to learn layout, then composition, storytelling, framing, cinematography, all of that's going to be essential. So every kind of end goal of I want to be this, that, and the other does have a pathway to it, which we do support people with. It's just that, as you say, it's really helpful if you're doing, modeling, that if you're studying human anatomy, people don't study themselves, which I find weird. It's like you literally have an anatomy on you, like you're living it. So when you're creating the arm, why aren't you looking at the arm in the mirror? Why aren't you looking at what happens when you twist your wrist and where do the wrinkles appear? Because very quickly, as soon as you start moving around, you can start to say, oh, actually, it's interesting. The wrinkles will form in the opposite direction to the muscle direction. So that then feeds into your sculpting work and your topology. So again, it kind of goes back to the real world, but yes, depending on what you're studying, you will want to have some kind of pathway to get you to that end goal. But I would litter that pathway with real world examples every time. So if I had to learn lighting or teach lighting in, say, Maya, like properly, I wouldn't say here in Maya, here's a spotlight, here's an area light, here's a directional light, here's how they work, here's the attributes, here's the da-da-da. I would say, okay, let's look at a real world spotlight. Let's see how that works. Let's see how we can change the penumbra and we can use barn doors to change the shape. Let's see what happens if we add a gobo. Now let's do that in the computer. Let's take a torch or a laser and see how that, changes things. And now let's do that in the computer. So everything does have a learning pathway, but it's all based on kind of reality. The reality side isn't so you follow it to the letter. It's so you can break it later on should you wish to, because you're going to want to go off reality. That's storytelling. That's what you'll probably want to do on a lot of occasions. But I find a lot of people don't know what reality is half the time anymore. They're just living in a world of made up images and made up everything that we're kind of losing touch with what's real and what's not. And hence why experience is important, I reckon. Not experience in terms of 10 years in the industry, but just lived experience. I experienced this out in the real world. I saw the trees and the way that they moved in the wind. I could hear the wind going through those trees, so I get a sense of sound, visual, smell, all of that stuff.
I have a perfect example for that, actually, that happened to me. So a few years ago, I did like a research on realistic digital actors and focusing specifically on dynamic microstructure skin, so basically the very small pores. And it was dynamic, so even if like not only the big wrinkles, but even the small pores will deform. And honestly, I was approaching this whole thing from pictures. And now, like literally a few years I didn't thought about it, and now I see I look at the skin of someone and I can see the microstructure suddenly, and I can see the deformation. But when I was doing the research, I was looking at it, but not in the real world.
Yeah.
And I noticed that it's because also the way of teaching and learning shifted in the last years. And that's a good example for that, where, and the same thing with lighting, I learned become better lighter by photography, just by doing this shots and finding more the beauty of the real world and this exceptional situations maybe, but the beauty in that and then the fakeness of like a studio lighting setup and whatever. It was kind of like a very strange thing that you don't even realize that you are too like focused on digital aspects, on references, not looking at your own skin, not looking at the people around you, and losing a lot of reference material basically on that approach, just be relying heavily on that one. Welcome to our short mid-episode coffee break. If you love the content and would like to have a successful career in the film or games industry yourself, check out my website 21artistshow.com. There you can find helpful articles, masterclasses, and coaching opportunities that help dozens of my students to bring their profession to the next level. That's all. Check out 21artistshow.com and share the podcast with cool people you know. Let's continue with the episode. One of the things that I would like to define before we move on to the final part is, so if I'm someone who's interested in visual effects, animation, or even games, and I come to Cave Academy, what exactly can I expect there?
We're very lucky that I'm still changing how we want to deliver stuff, or what will Cave Academy be. Initially, when we launched 3 years ago, it was meant to be just a series of tutorials that were hopefully useful to people, but a bit more structured. It was meant to be structured tutorials. And then we were meant to deliver it in a way, which is we would have students every year or so, and then we would deliver the same content every year. But I'm finding what's happened by doing that, because we've started that this year, is it actually slowed us down in terms of our content creation and the things we want to do. So at the minute, you could come to Cave and you'll find a course. It's almost the standalone course, modeling characters for feature animation. But what we want to do and what we are doing now, the transition is actually to be that plan of, if you start with 0, how can you get to the end result? And we're doing that at the minute with modeling, and then we're moving on to surfacing, and then we're moving into lighting and doing shots basically. So you can have a start to finish of all the different departments in one project. So it goes from one thing to the next. And that's how the training is going to run, really. So if you want to do, say, feature animation, we're going to have, building characters for feature animation, building props and hard surface assets for feature animation, and then going into shots and lighting. And it's all going to be story driven. So we create our own IP, our own characters. We have the concepts drawn up by professional concept artists, and then we basically build those projects and use them for teaching. It's a long-term plan. It's not something that's gonna happen overnight kind of thing. So we'll release courses as we go, but they're all going to be connected. Like, that's the important thing for us is you could go from a modeling props for VFX course into the surfacing props for VFX course, and it's the same data, it's the same kind of mentality, it's the same kind of approach to how we handle modeling for surfacing. and then same for lighting and rendering. So there's meant to be a consistency across that, and also a bit of a kind of a pipeline across that as well. So what we didn't want to do is have like 10 different artists create 10 different courses and they're not connected. So we've actually slowed down and said no to a number of people who've got in touch to say, we want to do a course for you, because we said we're not looking to just do as many courses as we can to make, to release just as many courses as we can. We're actually extremely slow, which I'm sure some people have noticed, in terms of getting content out, because it is meant to be a case of one thing leads to the next and it's connected, and it all starts with onset and observation. So everything that we actually do starts with that research stage, and hence why it's like a series of courses is almost like a 3-year plan, because it just takes that many steps to build.
What would be like your perfect result at the end of the day? Like how, so for example, someone is like interested in visual effects, they come to KF Academy. How would you want to present them like the whole like workflow? Would you want at the end of the day to have like a kind of a semester, maybe digitally, maybe mixed, whatever, or just a big library of like, you can start here and then go through there?
To begin with, it's going to be a self-study curriculum of all pre-recorded, really. So they could work through all the courses of a particular set, and they can have contact in terms of, through Discord, or they can get in touch directly with the tutors. So, but they will work through that content themselves, really. So that might be like a VFX stream, an animation stream, and then later on, this is years, a game stream. We were planning to, and we did start to, it just took up too much time and pulled us away from some of the other projects. We're not planning to do like, you can join us for a year and we'll hands-on teach you. Although, again, we're just finishing what we're doing now with that, because again, it slowed down these other projects. So really it's going to be self-study, but with guidance. So again, you will learn modeling, texturing, look dev, animation, and everything else, layout, camera tracking, object tracking. But it's not live, it's pre-recorded. And the reason for the pre-recorded, again, is because we're able to do a whole lot more by doing that, in terms of, like I could, if I'm doing animation training, for example, with a live session, I wouldn't be able to go out and study people walking live. So I can pre-record all of that and then apply it, and then we can do a Q&A and something like that if we need to. And I find with online learning anyway, the live sessions, although they're useful, a lot of the times people will just sit there and watch. So some people will ask questions, but not everyone. And what I found with the online learning is people always ask questions after the session anyway. Like they'll get in touch, not during the session, they'll get in touch after the session, then they'll ask loads of questions. So with the live learning, I find I'm just, like you said earlier, you're just repeating the same stuff 3 or 4 times. And I want to use that time to create more content, more unique kind of content. So learning wise, yeah, it will be more self-study more than anything, but with guidance.
Obviously, it's not only to, find the best modeling course for different parts and whatever. It's also to especially for you, I think a lot of people come that are completely new, maybe even, who are like, okay, I want to start this industry, maybe even. So they sometimes also need guidance in terms of, what should I learn? Like, what's the first step? What is the next step? And like, you need like literally like a semester basically, where you get like your curriculum, and then if this is you basically like having a questionnaire. You fill out some forms, and then it will give you, okay, if you want to become a VFX artist, generalist, whatever, this is the set 20 courses that you should do from KF Academy.
So on our wiki, we have, for some departments, we have a structure of this is what we recommend learning. So we have it for modeling actually, and it says, okay, if you want to be a modeler, do these 5 exercises, which means you have to learn anatomy, this, that, and the other. We're planning to release on our wiki, so it'll all be free, what we recommend as a kind of list of topics to learn for different departments. So all the things I've mentioned there about kinesiology and layout and composition and shot theory and shot language, all of that's going to be released as really it's a curriculum, open source curriculum, you can think of it. And the reason for releasing it open source is because we want as many universities and colleges and other educational institutes to pick it up. Because I find that when I go to a lot of universities and do teaching, and I look at the curriculum, I find there's a lot of holes in the learning because everyone's just trying to do the next big thing. So during the kind of COVID, virtual production craze, everyone just changed all their courses up to say, we're just in virtual production because that's what everyone's asking for. So they stopped teaching the fundamentals. And then the same is for, AI. Everyone's like, but we just want to teach AI because that's the next big thing. And it just feels like everyone's just jumping on the next big thing and they want to change their curriculums up based on the next big thing, where we're going in the opposite direction. We'll be releasing more structured guidance in terms of if you want to get into, virtual production or AI or anything, you still need to be able to feed some knowledge into that. So therefore, it's a good idea to learn about, art and history and anatomy and all these they're not bolt-ons, they're fundamentals, this kind of ground truth of art and filmmaking and life, really. So yeah, all of that stuff, we've released snippets of it, but we've definitely got a lot more to release. And again, that's going to go out on our wiki for free. And the same with, so there's two things we're doing on that. There's the curriculum, let's say, of here's the lessons we recommend taking, but there's also the workflow, which is if you are modeling a character, here's how we recommend you model a character. And that's meant to be more of a pipeline diagram. So, data in, do the topology, get it reviewed, then have it approved. If it doesn't get approved, go back to topology. And we'll do that for every department as well. So we're really, you mentioned about we get a lot of new people. When we started 3 years ago, that was my intention, is people who are getting into VFX or animation, they were our customer. What we've actually found is we've had more companies using our training than anticipated. We've had more artists who are currently working in the industry get in touch about the training. And our actual bigger client, let's say, is VFX professionals, not actually students. We do get some students, but we're actually more in tune with industry. So our teaching is actually more about kind of pipeline workflow and less about button pressing and the fundamentals. So we use the buttons to do the end result, but we teach the fundamentals and we teach production process and pipeline more than anything. And that's what we're going to carry on doing. Like one of the bigger plans is to, for every department, have a very clear in and out. So if you're going into texturing, you need your model to come in, you need your, maybe you're doing text dev, that's been done by someone else. You've got your UVs, you've got your reference and your photography of your asset that you're building. You then do your work and then you pass out a USD file with the model and the textures and so on. So that's our plan actually for training. It isn't really to sell ourselves to, say, students or anything. It's to create training that fits a production pipeline. So if a studio starts up and says, we need our artists to know about model naming conventions and show space, scale, then they can go to Cave Academy website and go, we're just going to stick with their format of how we're handling assets. So again, it's a bit of a strange approach or different approach to just any other training school, but we'll open source as much of it as possible as well, because the idea is that if you're studying at 5 different universities, or you've got 5 different students from 5 different universities, that they will all be able to approach a studio like ILM, DNEG, MPC and say, I know about model naming conventions, I've followed the Cave kind of guidance on that. And our conventions kind of follow industry a bit. Not always, we make some of it up based on what we think would work best, but it's meant to have some logic behind it.
Not surprised. It also shows a little bit of the state of the industry, like, about the bad education in the industry. People start working as professionals without really understanding things. But it also shows the demand for people who understand what it means to be professional about principles. Where people who don't understand anything, they just like want a $1 million solution, while people who understand that, they just like, okay, I'd rather learn a principle than the buzzword thingy and the clicking button. So I think that is also a detriment to principles over button pressing and just simple practice, basically. One of the things that brought me to you also is the approach, and you mentioned it multiple times now. You don't really care about the money part. You don't really find it super important, the business aspect of the whole thing and the selling aspect and so on. I was wondering, like, what's the focus of the business while still staying a business, kind of like how do you manage that? And do you feel that this is also maybe takes away from being aggressive enough? And I mean that aggressive in positive terms, being like, out there so people see you and people come to you, because that's something I struggled also a long time with, being afraid of promoting myself, because I hate like and subscribe. I hate the empty videos or the empty blog posts that basically only are pitched to selling a course. And so for me, it became also a little bit of an allergic reaction to my own content when I create something that I feel like, yeah, obviously there's a connection to my business, else I wouldn't create it. But it's still content that leads to, if you want more content and deeper content, leads to something else like masterclass. How do you find this balance, or what is basically the idea here to keep that as a kind of a half non-profit, half business, half, I don't know what kind of elements it is, basically?
We are a business. We're not a non-profit. I did think about that at one stage, but we are a for-profit, I guess you would call it, company. However, we do give a lot of it away to charities and good causes that I am I want to support, basically. And again, it wasn't intended that we would get a lot of studio interest. When I launched over 3 years ago now, and even thinking ahead of that, in terms of as running it as a business, and again, I've got 4 kids now, so I had 3 at university and 4th later. Obviously, we have to pay bills and keep their fires going and so on. So it can't be 100% non-profit, and it never was intended to. What I found though is just working with studios is that they became a big kind of financial success, really, because they would basically pay me to do training, so I could go to a studio and teach, and I charge them a certain rate. So because that was coming in, and it still does come in, it just meant that everything Cave was doing financially extra, like students coming in giving money, it was all to me extra. Like we had a certain amount of money coming in, and we still do, from industry and training industry. That everything from the student side of things was kind of like, to me, it just felt like a bonus. Like, oh my goodness, these people are paying for courses and so on. So I guess what we ended up doing and still do is, there was loads of stuff happening around the world in terms of the war in Ukraine and the Turkey-Syria earthquake, and again, it's just been a bit constant that money that came in, I just gave it really straight back out to help good causes. And you do the same for planting trees, and we do we support WWF every month, and we've got another project that's just about to launch, where 100% of it will go to this oceanic project. So all that money that comes in, it's just, again, it's great that it comes in, but it's not something that I feel comfortable accepting and putting into a bank account and just taking. So we're actually just reinvesting that back in. And that's going okay. I think if it's everything else goes as it is going with the studios and that carries on working, then we'll continue that. I'm not saying everything that comes in the cave goes back out again, because we do have to, we have to invest in other trainers, we have to invest in equipment, and we have to invest in be it hardware, software, all of that stuff. So it has to go towards the building the company. But yeah, no, I'm kind of happy with that. We're able to do that alongside it.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, it changes, and that's, I think, the point that I want to make here. It changes the way that you approach the content and approach the marketing and approach the workflow and collaboration. And as you said, also that you approach maybe consistencies and quality, where you maybe say like, hey, this doesn't, we cannot just put everyone on the line. You need maybe to have a little bit of an integration process to create something that fits exactly into that. Like, for example, if you have something like CG Academy, which I did my masterclass in there, it was complete, like every course was completely different. People from rigging course actually came to me because they were recommended. That was super nice. But my course was so like not even in any cases related to there. So I didn't even know what they did. And that creates this disconnect that we all experience often, where you have this video and this course, and it's like all of them are all over the place basically, and often not related to us.
It is a goal to make it all as consistent as possible. And again, not all of our courses do that at the minute, but that is the goal.
It's a process also. Figuring out what is the consistency that you want to create.
I know what I want it to be in terms of training and consistency and curriculum. It's just now creating it. And I think if we're only doing that with the people who I think will enforce that kind of philosophy of what I want it to be. So again, like I said, we don't say yes to everyone who wants to create training content. We say a lot more no's than yeses. And even the people that we do work with, we narrow down what they're going to teach based on the philosophy of everything else we're doing in the background. In terms of getting content out there onto social media and marketing and all of that stuff, again, I think because in my head, we have a kind of, you spoke about goals earlier, we do have a goal of how we want to see ourselves and the content we want to be delivering, that we're not, and again, fortunately for us, we don't feel like we're competing to get students, or we're competing to get industry support, or we're competing with anyone else for, anything really. And I don't mean that in the sense that we think we're better. I just mean, I think we're on a certain path, and even if it's not successful, I'm not planning to change it because I suddenly have to make it financially viable. I'm just looking to make it as consistent and carry on down that road as possible without challenging other companies. I think there's so many good training companies out there that I'm not even looking at it as a way of I want to take their students. In fact, in a sense, we're actually helping some of these other companies because they're using our content now to complement their teaching. So there's a number of universities and colleges using our light rigs and things like that, and I'm seeing their student work, and I don't get jealous of it and thinking, I wish I had them as a student and they were working for us. I'm just like, that's fantastic. The more we can spread the kind of content and the knowledge and get it into their schools, the better.
It is marketing in itself, basically, as you mentioned, I think in the pre-talk, it creates marketing in a positive way where you don't have to enforce it. It's people will talk about good quality, basically.
It was never intended that colleges and universities and other places would be using our content for their teaching. But that is happening, and that's good. I'm not going to call them up and say, can you stop doing that, please? This is our stuff. The more people who can get on board with our content and use it in some shape or form, then hopefully the more consistent we can just make training across the board. So when industry, recruit someone who's new to the industry, they'll get that person and say, here's my reel, and it's got a certain turntable in there. They'll hopefully go, okay, cool. We kind of know how you did things and what you're doing and why you're doing it this way. And and that makes sense for them. We get a lot of input from industry, and we also input into software companies as well. We're working with a couple of companies at the minute to help the way they do their workflow and tools. So we're kind of trying to do a 360 in a sense. In terms of what we release online, though, again, it's just stuff that I think is either quite fun or quite interesting. I don't do it for likes and follows and things like that, because we don't actually get many likes and we don't get many follows from it. When you think of likes, people are like, oh, this got thousands or 100,000 views or millions of views. We get 100, 200 if we're lucky. But the funny thing is, when I go to live events, I get a lot of people come up and say, we see your stuff and, it's good and you like it. We had at the head of one company, a really big company, FMX, came up to me and said, oh yeah, we see your stuff, it's great, and so on. And I'm always amazed when someone says they see it, because on paper, numbers wise, it's not big stuff. It's like tiny. So when someone says they see it, I'm always just kind of like, wow, really surprised. I was doing a meeting with someone. It was a work-related meeting on a different project, and he was the head of the company, a huge company for a games company, and even he said, yeah, I see your stuff. Right at the end of the meeting, so we just finished up. We were talking about heads and whatever, and he said, oh yeah, we see your stuff, or the cave stuff. It's really good. And again, I'm just always, I don't know what to do. I'm just like, oh, thanks very much. Never a bit bashful.
I can totally relate. I do a video and it's like 400 views, 10, 20 likes or something like that. And then still I get still students coming. I watch your content for years now. Students approach me if I will go to FMX and stuff like that. So it's always surprising, even though you don't feel like, a success in terms of, viewership or whatever. It's the people who are really interested. They are around your sphere and they will watch this content and think that this is exactly what they need and appreciate it at the end of the day. So we all had to learn a little bit that these numbers don't really mean anything.
Yeah. I mean, I remember once we were doing a webinar series. We got to start it again soon, actually. And one of the talkers, and we've had amazing talkers on, speakers on there. We've got hundreds and thousands of followers and whatever. And one person replied back and said, you haven't got many followers, as in Cave. And I just ignored it. I just thought, I can't bother with the numbers thing. So I didn't reply back or anything. I just thought, if that's your game, if the game is that you're more interested in followers and likes and subscribers, then, good for you. I'm happy for you, but it's not our game. Our game isn't to get as many likes and followers as possible. Our game is to help people learn VFX through real world experience. And that's it. It's as simple as it is. We're not, there's no hidden agenda. And I think that what's been really nice to see is when people do get in touch, whether that's through Discord or LinkedIn and the Instagram as well, they're the big three news. It's nice that they will get in touch and they'll put a comment and they'll share a bit of work and then we just have a bit of back and forth. And I kind of like that. I don't really want to lose that. And I think when people say about growing as a company, it's if we grow, yes, you can make more money and you can get more students, but I think you lose that connection, and I don't want to lose that connection. We've had a couple of people approach us company-wise as a way of saying, look, if we invest in your company, we can get you into these regions and we can get thousands of students and it can be profitable. And then as soon as they say that kind of stuff, then I just kind of say, look, it doesn't interest me.
I want to lose money. I don't want to gain money.
Yeah, well, I don't want to lose money. It's just that if I was to gain money, I know I'd give a lot of it away anyway.
You want to know where this money is coming from and when money is investing back, basically.
It just felt like they weren't doing it to better the students. They were doing it to increase their bank balance. And my approach will always, well, I hope it always will be, my intention is that we help people learn VFX because they want to get a job, or they want to just cross-train, become better people, rather than help someone make more money.
No, but I love it. That's one of the reasons I wanted you to be on the show, because I want to show also that it's not the only way you can be that or this, or you have to make a business as profitable as impossible. Often it's it's profitable enough, and you can use the extra time that you don't have to invest into marketing and all this pushing into observation, focusing on something that you enjoy, So that is basically the trade. Like, do you want to make more money, or do you want to have more freedom? It is a little bit the trade that you have. What do you think of YouTube learning for beginners? So going on YouTube and watching visual effects, whatever video in that category, from what you are basically teaching to, what do you think as a platform for learning?
I've got no quarrels with YouTube learning, or anyone learning from wherever they want to learn. I think even with our content, you just have to be aware that things change, knowledge changes, and you have to be open to changing your ideas of what someone says is, the way, whatever. So I think as long as you're open to change and relearning and approaching things slightly differently, maybe here and there, then you will, any learning really, YouTube or anything else. I think what I would avoid, and I saw this actually the other day, it was about, I forget what the video was on. It was about USD. That was it. And the person was going into, here's USD, here's what it does, and here's the differences between OBJ, FBX, and USD. But as he was talking, it was quite clear that he didn't actually know about OBJ, and he didn't know very much about FBX, and he didn't actually know that much about USD. And therefore, if you were to take all of that in and accept what he was telling you as gospel, then you'd be in trouble, because you're now learning from someone who doesn't actually know what he says he knows about. And again, guilty of it myself on occasion, for sure. So just be prepared to cross-reference. That'll be the big thing, is wherever you're learning, cross-reference it.
My general tip is avoid YouTube if you're still not sure about, because it's too easy to fall into the trap of, oh, that sounds so simple on YouTube, or this video is so digestible. One of the things that Hugo and a few other people came on was basically always research the person talking about the topic. I think maybe also it will save you on YouTube, but I think that is the most common way to approach it. Like, know who it is, and then you can value their output much more than someone who looks fancy with nice graphics and introduction.
What I don't go for is short form learning, like where you get these 1 minute, 30-second videos or 50-second videos that's going to teach you everything you need to know in 10 seconds. I don't go for that, because I think it's I think they're edited in a way to make everything look like it works, and in real life it's slightly different. So I'm not a big fan of shorter learning. I know someone said to me, can you we had a 1 hour training session planned. They said, can you do it in 15 minutes? And I said no. And they said, well, can you trim it down? And I said, I'm not going to.
And you make a TikTok video out of it.
Yeah, well, that's what it was leading to. So, not TikTok. but it is that idea of I'm not going to take out a lot of content, what I think is valuable for someone's training, just because you want to make it shorter for your algorithm or whatever reason. But so I don't compromise. You
were not particularly older, but you were definitely not the youngest person starting in visual effects, because you had the career before. Basically, your impression of starting a little bit later, you're not like 16 or 18 when you start visual effects and stuff like that. Because I have a lot of people who are starting, and there's some fear coming from that. What was your experience?
I'm always doing stupid stuff nowadays as well. Like when I hang out with the kids and stuff, like I'm the one who's messing about. So I think I don't know if it's maturity or, again, I had to ensure that I put in the work in order that I found employment, and I didn't mess about when it came to putting in the work, and I still did. So when I was going to university to study, and again I would have been in my late 20s at that stage, but I went in, I did my work, and then I went home, and did more work. And then I went back in and I did more work and I just put in the time. I think when people say to me now, they'll be like, oh, have you seen Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad? And even now, I don't know what shows a lot. The Last of Us. I haven't seen any of it. I just haven't. I watch films, but I don't have the time, I guess, to watch a gazillion shows because I'm still learning and developing, trying to figure things out. So I think if you're starting later, as long as you put the work in, obviously it's going to be harder if you've got a full-time job and you're then having to learn and you've got a family. However, it's all doable, I would say. I basically had a full-time job and kids and still learn in the evenings. You just got to put the effort in. I think you just have to make sure, though, that you are actually working and not just on the computer, or you're not scrolling through loads of other people's work. And I think that's the danger of stuff, is people will scroll through other people's work and wish they were as good and think they're getting better by just watching this other person work when in fact they're not practicing. Well, that's going to be the biggest thing to become good at anything, is you have to put the effort in and practice.
I think it can be even an asset to some degree, and I think in your case you described it as an asset, is because you don't have as much time to play around. You're just so deliberate on what you do. You're just afraid of wasting your time on something because you don't have so much of it. I think there's a little bit of an asset going of you're kind of catching up on not even on purpose, but because if you only have 2 hours a day to do anything, then you will make sure that this 2 hours a day are, you're not scrolling through YouTube or TikTok or something like that at the end.
Even when I was working at DNEG, I was going up and down the train. That was an hour and a half journey each way and then 20-minute walk each way. So 2 hours or so. That hour and a half would either be time to sleep because I was catching up with sleep from working late, or I'd be working in terms of planning something, whether that was writing some curriculum or planning just how the website's going to look for Cave Academy. All of that was time spent to ensure that something else can happen later on. So, yeah, I would say for anyone learning is just, maybe monitor what you're spending your time on. Because if you are finding that you spent 2 hours scrolling through the internet, then if that wasn't beneficial, then I'd question why you're doing that. And if you're not seeing results in terms of employment or your quality of your work, then I would again question, what you can change in order to mix it up a little.
What are your thoughts on runners as a career path?
That's one, I guess, for industry. And where do they want? What do they want that pathway anymore for people getting into the industry? I think it's very valuable if they can. At DNEG, we had a bunch of runners who were fantastic. They wanted to get into a mix of artists and production roles. I don't know what it's like now. Sorry, this was 4 or 5 years ago. And I think it's a great way of getting into a company, learning about the company, meeting loads of people. I think you just have to be very proactive in terms of getting your next step. Like, it's not going to be handed to you. They're not going to be like, oh, you've been a runner for 2 months. Congratulations. You can now go into this role. You still have to be very proactive.
It's not a participation award, basically.
Yeah, exactly. It's not at all. And nothing is, though. Like, any role isn't going to lead to another role just because you participate. So, but I do think, the runners that I met at DNEG were all lovely. There's one runner I actually met at FMX again. And I remember that she was a runner and she said she's interested in costume design because she was a real world costume designer, physical, making real costumes. And I'd had a conversation with the feature animation department where they said they needed someone to help with their digital costumes, marvelous designer. And it was like, oh, the runner down there knows real world costume, you should speak to her. So she went up and spoke to them and then they took her on. She became their costume designer. She's still there now. So there is a pathway, but you have to, again, with everything, you can't wait for opportunities. You have to go out and grab as many as you can and put yourself forward. I'm hoping studios do still value runners, because not only is it good for them to get into the industry, but in terms of, company culture and keeping places running, they do a really valuable task. Nothing happens in a big studio in terms of room setup and drinks and food and catering, organization, and things just work when runners and the whole facilities team do their thing. Like they're for me anyway, they're just as valuable as an artist sitting behind their desk pushing buttons. And that's the same with recruitment and HR and R&D and all these other departments. They're all part of the VFX process.
We previously talked about like connecting to people, how important it is. You were especially mentioning like, your surroundings and stuff like that. What tip would you give someone who is not in the industry, completely out of everything, starting just now? How to create connection as a non-insider, basically?
LinkedIn's always a good one. That's my go-to platform for building connections. I think before I got in the industry, I had messaged, I don't know if it was on LinkedIn, I'd linked into him, Carlos Cincinnati, that rigging course at Noman. And I had asked him a few questions about the rig I was building. And he commented and he gave me notes and feedback. And I've just been doing that ever since. Like, again, I'm always surprised when someone replies back of any level. Like, I don't really care about titles. So when someone just replies back and they answer a question, I'm always just like super excited. That was my first experience of, actually, you can reach out to someone and they will more than likely help. And I've continued that ever since. Like, I will email people or message them who are senior R&D people at these huge companies. They've just won an Oscar, and I'll ask them a question about this, that, and the other. And you'll be surprised how many people will reply back. And I think if you can start that, I wouldn't just randomly message them like, hello, how are you? And then it's like, I'm fine. And it's like, okay, bye. I usually message with a purpose if I have a question or something. But I guess you have to. But I've never messaged anyone and gone, please give me, a job or anything like that, like randomly out of the blue. I'll usually message about collaboration in some shape or form. I would say, yeah, you can connect to people, comment on their work, comment on their, if you like their work, say something, see what happens, it might lead to something. A lot of the jobs that I get are actually based on someone seeing something on LinkedIn and then getting in touch and wanting to collaborate in some shape or form. Especially leaving DNEG, I guess, most of my work, extra or professional work, has come from either someone recommending me from DNEG. So they left DNEG, they went to a new company and they said, you should call Jay in to do this training. Or someone on LinkedIn seeing something and saying, I saw your work on LinkedIn, can you come into our studio and do some training? So it's been either word of mouth or LinkedIn. I would just reach out to people. Just don't be, just reach out with a purpose, or with a, like, if you like their work, comment on my work and say, look, I'm a fan of your work, and see where it goes. A few people actually, like Hugo Guerra and Victor Perez, amazing people. Like, they're people that, when I was starting up, I would look at their stuff and just go, their teaching's amazing, or they just seem like fantastic people. And then one day I would just message Hugo and say, hey, Hugo, I'm doing this thing, I'm interested. And it's kind of like, will Hugo ever reply to just me? And he does, and it's like, oh, amazing. And then he continues to be amazing. And the same with Victor Perez. When I see him at FMX every now and then, just say a quick hello. It's just so warm and lovely, and that's how it's been with a lot of people in VFX. I find that people have just generally been amazing, and you can connect to them and say hello, and hopefully they'll say hello back.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, Victor Perez and Hugo Guerra we had on this podcast too, and actually the continuation was like, I'm still in touch with them. And for example, one of the things that we discussed were I was looking for a monitor for traveling, like a second monitor. And I actually talked with Victor Perez because I was asking about like color reference, so it's accurate and stuff like that. And he he was also promoting often, especially Asus and stuff like that. And he was like, yeah, try this one out, which is exactly that, like it put it up from a simple question, then inviting them to the show, and then later still, keeping in contact. And totally, I believe that is a great way to approach that.
One of the biggest companies we work with is Clear Angle Studios. And with Clear Angle Studios, I mean, I'd seen their work before. We'd used their data internally at DNEG. So I found out who owned the company. I always try and go for the owner if I know who that is of a company to approach. And then I sent him a message. I said, can I come down and speak to you? I'm starting this training company. And he said, yeah, come down, say hello. And that was at Pinewood Studios. I went down and said hello. He showed me around. We had a good chat. And he said, whatever you want help with, just let me know and I'll do my best to help you. And I thought he was joking. It's like, just a nice thing to say. And he has been, so Dominic Ridley is his name. He has been our biggest supporter and just constantly makes himself available to support us in everything we do from day one. Like he has just been fantastic. And that all started from just me sending a message on LinkedIn. And now Clear Angle Studios, they'll give us scan data, they'll give us cameras and lenses. So a lot of what we're able to do in terms of the onset is because of Clear Angle Studios and really the support of Dom Ridley. So I would definitely say, reach out to people, because it's as much as you can be a self-learner and pick things up and figure things out, sometimes just having someone to ask questions to, who is in the industry, he's been doing it for a while, can really just help accelerate your learning as well.
Not only learning, as you mentioned, also your career path, there's opportunities coming from that and so on. Okay, final question. The most exciting question of the whole podcast. If you need to pick one video that everyone should watch, made by you.
Made by me.
Which video would be like where you say, this is something I made that I believe is something so important in general, like, it's not about being like important, but it's like, so you would so recommend everyone watching, just give a little bit of an insight into a specific element of visual effects, for example.
I haven't made it yet, but it's in the works. Can I say that?
Yeah.
I'm happy to tell you what it will be, but I haven't made it yet. And I think I'd rather talk about that, what it will be, because that is important to me in terms of learning.
Pitch us the idea, basically.
I always talk to students about reference and going out, and basically what we've been talking about, going out in the real world and capturing data and experiencing real life and then putting that back into your work. So what we're planning to do, hopefully, today is May 13th. We'll be doing this in June, mid to late June. It's going on and doing an onset trip with endangered animals, sharks in Haiti. Hopefully this all happens now, because if it doesn't, I'll be sad. But yeah, the plan is to capture in the element, in the water, onset reference of shark, any other kind of marine life while we're down there. We don't quite know until we get down there. And then do model, texture, look the rig, animate, lighting or texture, layout, camera tracking, etc. underwater. So it's basically going to be an underwater shoot, and the training is all going to be based on that real world knowledge. So that video, it's going to be a bunch of videos, but that training is all about going out into the real world, capturing something, understanding it, learning about the anatomy, learning about the physiology and movement, and then rebuilding that in CG. And I think that's my general philosophy, which I keep going on about to everyone, is you got to go out and see it and live it and then build it in CG. So I think that's that whole project is going to be our kind of philosophy of teaching, is go outside and live it and then bring it back and make it.
Basically, we would recommend to go to everyone who's interested to go to Cave Academy and subscribe to the newsletter to get notification about that, for example.
Yeah. That's you're good at sales. I'm terrible. I mean, we'll be posting more info on that.
such an interesting conversation to have with you because I'm also in the field. I have a different angle, but also we align a lot of parts in how we do things. So it's a very interesting conversation to see. And it's also 2 years in the making, actually. I reached out to you 2 years ago on LinkedIn, coming back to LinkedIn and connecting. And yeah, it just didn't work out at that time. And 2 years later, we reached out again, basically. I reached out again, and then we finally made it. And yeah, it's a little bit this real world experience of things like, you have to reach out, you have to ask questions. I literally reached out to you because I found your approach insanely appealing and new a little bit to what I see in generally, and also reflecting a lot of my values. That is one of the reasons. And for example, LinkedIn built the connection, then it allowed us to have an easy conversation. I think that was really nice. But yeah, same as you described. I had like a clear goal. I had a clear question. It's like I would like to understand more about your philosophy and what is this about, and this lead up to that. So thank you very much for joining me. It's such a pleasure to have you and get to dive into this whole system that you built, this whole construction of principles basically that you try to follow, through so much time, so you invest, like as you said, the next 1.5 years will be for this one, experience or this one course basically. I find it fascinating also the willingness to go so deep in pun intended, to go so deep into this thing and stick to the fundamentals that you believe are basically will avoid one thing that a lot of courses have. They will not outdate themselves because they will stay, obviously you maybe made a video with Maya in that situation and maybe in 5 years Maya is not so relevant, but the principle doesn't matter if it was applied in Maya or Houdini or something like that. You can still watch the same video and just follow along in a different software. So really, really appreciate the whole thing.
Likewise. No, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, Alex.
Any final comments or any final advice or maybe something about your Cave Academy that you'd like to pitch or something like that?
No, I don't want to pitch anything. I kind of like the organic nature of things and word of mouth more than anything. So I don't tend to pitch and sell things. No, I just want to say thank you very much for having me, Alex. You're right. It's been 2 years since we've been speaking, and obviously a lot's happened in that 2 years in terms of the world and everything around us. So it's been a pleasure speaking with you finally, and we look forward to seeing more of your work as well. It's always good to catch your stuff.
That's it with this week's episode of the 21 Artist Show. Thank you so much for watching and listening. This podcast is 100% ad-free, and to keep it that way, check out my website 21artistshow.com. There you can find exclusive access to awesome masterclasses and coaching opportunities to work successfully in visual effects, animation, and games. Just go to 21artistshow.com. And don't forget to share it with people who would benefit from that content and tell them they're awesome. See you on the next episode.